Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this Friday for this incredibly important CEU. Shows that everybody here is interested in taking care of themselves and others. The topic today is complicated grief following COVID-19 with Dwight Bain. My name is Gavi Berman. I'm the Director of Business Development at Central Florida Behavioral Hospital, and I will be your MC for this presentation. Just a couple of housekeeping items for the presentation. Today's webinar is 2 hours long, including Q&A, which Dwight will have at the end of the presentation. All participants during the presentation are going to be muted. We have over 500 people here expected to join the call, so it would be quite difficult to unmute the lines. When asking questions, I ask please that everybody uses the Q&A function rather than the chat function. We'll monitor, and I'll curate questions and bring them to Dwight's attention when he opens up the presentation for Q&A. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our resource center along with a lot of other resources that we've made available along with Dwight. So if somebody needs to catch this at a later point in time, it will be available later today. When the presentation ends or you exit Zoom, you will automatically receive a prompt in your web browser which says that you are about to access an external website. And what that is the evaluation that you would normally do after you finish a CEU event. So it'll automatically come up onto your screen and prompt you to do it. So just continue following the prompts and please complete the evaluation. Certificates of completion will be emailed out to everybody who submitted with their registration, their license number, when they registered for the webinar. And CE credit will be issued within 30 days of completion of the webinar, but likely will be done much sooner. And if anybody forgot or maybe gave me possibly the wrong license number, absolutely feel free to send me a message and I can go ahead and get that fixed. But you should have submitted your licensure number when you registered for the event. And with that, I'd like to introduce our CEO here at Central Florida Behavioral Hospital, Vicki Lewis, to say a few words and introduce our speaker.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our continuing education on complicated grief following COVID-19. One of the statements that I use a lot right now is hope sees. Hope sees beyond this crisis. Hope sees beyond the questions that we have. Hope sees beyond the disappointment of not being able to attend graduations, weddings, funerals. Hope sees beyond those that have lost jobs and wonder what the next day will be like. I see hope in the very basic fact today that over 500 people across Florida, as well as other states, and so many organizations are preparing on how to handle this mental health crisis for people beyond the post-epidemic. It is my pleasure this morning to again introduce Dwight Bain, a trusted professional of mine. Dwight is the founder and president of the LifeWorks Group and is a nationally certified counselor in practice since 1984. His primary focus is on solving crisis events with creative solutions. Dwight is a trusted media resource who has been interviewed on over 500 radio and television stations, as well as quoted in over 100 newspapers, websites, including the New York Times, Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, Atlanta Journal, Orlando Sentinel, Miami Herald, Newsday, Fox Business, and MSNBC. So with that, I would like to turn our presentation over now to you, Dwight. Will you take it?
Well, thanks very much for those kind words, and I'm very happy to be part of this conversation. It's an essential conversation because we've lived through so many hurts and so many losses, and so much is going on. So let me just say that as we go through our time today, there's going to be a number of different issues that that may be very hard. And so I just want you to focus on the parts that apply to you. Complicated grief, just like it sounds, is a clinical and psychiatric disorder. But as we're going to go through our time, I want you to picture it like a giant-shaped U. We're going to go down into complicated grief. We're going to deal with hurt and loss. And we're going to deal with some topics that may be very challenging. And that's okay. And that's normal. Because as we move forward, I want you to understand the webinar may be very personal. It may trigger some strong emotions. Again, that's totally normal. It's not a sign of weakness to be able to feel these things. It's a sign of human. And when I say it's a sign of human, it's because sometimes people will be in a situation and they'll go, oh my goodness gracious, I can't believe I had this breakdown. I was talking with a local leader a few days ago who was very weepy, and he kept apologizing. And I said, that's the normal reaction. Remember, this is an abnormal situation. And so the normal reaction in an abnormal situation is to be deeply affected. Grief, complicated grief, can lead to different psychiatric disorders, as I'll explain to you. But remember I said it's a giant U shape? Because with the U shape, we're going to go down and then we're going to come back up. So it's a safe evaluation to get you ready. But let me say, this is not therapy. You may need therapy. I have a therapist that I've talked to multiple times. We're on week 7 on the pandemic timeline here in Central Florida that I've been tracking. Week 7 before the lockdown ends, and we go into 18 straight months of being affected by different waves of grief and hurt and loss. We'll talk about the timeline about halfway through our presentation today. And let me say thank you to my friends at Central Florida Behavioral Hospital, Vicki Lewis and her team. They were one of the very first to step up 6 weeks ago and say, we must get our community ready. And I appreciate that partnership, because while this session is not therapy, you may, as we go along, think of friends, family, coworkers that would benefit. And thankfully, Central Florida Behavioral Hospital has a number of tools and resources right on their website that you can access, and it will help you and it'll help the people that you love, because you have to take care of yourself. So let's talk about the day that Normal died. There was a funeral. You didn't know it. I didn't know it. By the way, that's the backpack that I've been carrying since March 11, 2020. When the news came from the World Health Organization, there was a pandemic called COVID-19. Honestly, on March 11, I didn't really understand what that meant. I had to look some things up. You see, pandemics are not new. They're just new to people in the United States. Around the world, people understand it. But everything normal died, as I'm going to be sharing with you. Remember, this may evoke emotion. It's perfectly fine if you need to take a break. If you feel your emotions stirred, as I shared with you, sometimes people in key leadership positions will get very weepy and they'll apologize. Don't apologize. We're dealing with complicated grief, and complicated grief deals with complex losses, material losses, financial, relationship, identity, function, role, changes in culture. We've seen how people of color are more powerfully impacted. We've seen how the working class are more deeply affected. I was giving a training in a different part of the state of Florida, I'll say, and there were a few people who complained that I was a fearmonger and a warmonger, and they said, you're talking that this is catastrophic. And I realized when I asked the host, I said, how do they not read? Do they not go to cdc.gov, coronavirus.gov? And she said, they live in a gated country club and they're bored, and they've been on lockdown for 5 weeks. And so if you're in the first responder world like me, you understand there's tremendous changes and loss, and some cultures and some diverse groups are much harder hit than others. So if you hear people saying very insensitive things, or celebrities posting pictures in their hot tub with their martinis, you understand they live in a different world than I do, but that's okay. I grew up in Central Florida, and my passion is to give you tools to help people I'll never meet, because people have lost mobility. They've lost traditions. College graduation, high school graduation, what's that? The suicide rate is unparalleled right now. A few weeks ago, talking to a pastor who said that there was a high school senior in his church because she knew that she was graduating to go to an elite school that's going to be closed because of COVID. And so she took her life. The tradition was taken away. And when I said that normal died, normalcy, let's take a look at what that means. The road ahead through COVID-19 is long and it is full of hidden grief. During one of the weeks, my wife and I went on a bike trail on the Katy Way here in Winter Park. And this was spray painted on a wall, 3.3 million unemployed. In 1 week, give us work or give us wages. We know right now over 23 million workers in the United States are unemployed. Here in Orlando, over 400,000. To give you comparison, the unemployment rate in January of 2020 in Central Florida was right at 3%, single digit. Now it's almost 30%, Channel 9 says. Almost 30%. It's gone up 10 times. That's a loss. And when you look at things like WestJet laying off, American Airlines cutting schedules by 80%, United Airlines cutting half of its flights. You said, well, Dwight, what does that matter? Orlando International Airport, one of the busiest airports in the country and the busiest in Florida, and now basically shuttered, just like the convention center. When you look at businesses, you may have seen Neiman Marcus filed for bankruptcy. Now J. Crew, Abercrombie, IKEA, J.C. Penney, Jenny Craig, Kohl's, all facing major catastrophe. And remember the tens of thousands of people who work there. And then you look into the retail sector. At Walmart, 4 stores have closed because of employees with coronavirus. Tyson, one of the leading producers of meat in the United States, have had team members die because of COVID, and they're shutting down operations. That's a loss. In the field of pro sports, there is none. Major League Baseball, soccer, PGA, ESPN, NASCAR, our Orlando Magic on the sidelines. No March Madness this year. The Olympics have been postponed. When they say unparalleled, it means we have nothing to compare it to. Every major concert shut down. South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. Comic-Con in San Diego. Every major convention shut down, just like the convention center here in Orlando. One of the second largest convention center in the United States, closed. And then there's our beloved Walt Disney World. I was there when Walt Disney World opened, just like my wife. We were kids. That's where everybody's dad worked. But in October of 1971, the parks opened, and we just love the Disney parks. My daughter worked there until she was furloughed. My son-in-law worked there until he was furloughed. Like 110,000 people in Central Florida currently laid off because the single largest site for employment, Walt Disney World, is padlocked. And what does it mean? Right now, it means an uncertain future, and it means that people are feeling the pressure. Remember, we're going down in a U shape, and we're looking at some hard things. During March, the disaster distress helpline saw a 338% in call volume compared to February. It went up over 300% in a month. And when you look at that, a lot of it was because of isolation, desperation. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline has seen a 45% increase. And you think that's bad? Well, the good news is people that are feeling trapped are at least asking for help. Some of them literally are trapped. We're seeing with COVID-19, because of now 6 weeks of lockdown in different parts of Central Florida, we've seen domestic violence at the highest level and child abuse. The coronavirus could cause a child abuse epidemic, perhaps 31 million new cases of children being violated emotionally, physically, and sexually. When we look at loss, paramedics, first responders, firefighters. In Seminole, Florida, the fire chief died from COVID-19 that he caught at a conference the second week of March. You may have seen in Claremont, the police officer, 52 years of age, who died of COVID complications last week. The first responders, many of them are scared because they're dealing with 911 calls and they think, am I going to pick this up and take it home to my family? You may have seen this at WFTV. Channel 9, Orange County has seen a spike in overdoses, Baker Acts, every form of mental health problem, because we've never seen anything like this before. More than 9,000 U.S. healthcare workers have been infected with coronavirus, and some dying by suicide. This is in Manhattan. Dr. Breen was a force and she was beloved. That's what one of her colleagues said on Twitter. She worked 30 straight days dealing with COVID cases in New York City. That's the hot spot for the United States. And they forced her to take a 4-day break, and that's how PTSD sets in. I'll teach you how that works, and more importantly, what to do about it so that you or the people that you love do not become self-destructive. She went home and took her life. They said she was a fine doctor. She was young. She was a professional, had strong beliefs. Everyone loved her. And she was the third one that week. Some people, when they go into the hospitals, they go there and they die alone. This nurse said the tragic last words of his coronavirus patient who was dying, who's going to pay the bill? Who's going to pay that bill when you die alone? This was in New York City, again, near the hot spot in Brooklyn. There were so many bodies at the funeral home, they were putting them into U-Haul trucks, just putting the body bags from the morgue into U-Haul trucks, unrefrigerated. The neighbors reported it because of the smell. You say, this is bizarre, Dwight. I know, it gets worse. We're on week 6 of an 18-month crisis. I'm going to give you a timeline. I'm going to show you how to deal with it. But remember, take notes on the parts that apply to you. Calls to U.S. helplines have jumped almost 900% compared to a year ago. And the White House has been warned there is a mental health crisis because Americans are in that mental health crisis. I believe that we're already there. That's why Central Florida Behavioral Hospital is sponsoring these training times, because there's so many new problems. Nobody's ever seen anything like this. But the people that are prepared with tools and resources, and that's what I'm going to give you today, you'll be able to get through it. It won't be easy, because I believe there is a mental health tsunami headed toward Florida. When lockdown ends, that will be in 3.5 weeks. People start coming out of their homes. It will look like the Japanese tsunami. It will just be overwhelming catastrophe. I call that the second wave, not the number of cases that you're going to hear about as lockdown ends. And when people say, oh, well, lockdown is over, everything's fine. No, when lockdown's over, it just means there's room in the emergency room for you. There's enough ventilators. It doesn't mean coronavirus is gone. U.S. Surgeon General Jerome Adams said it won't be back to a sense of going to a movie theater or a concert without a face mask. You won't be at that point until there's a vaccine. And that is roughly 18 to 20 months away. They're working diligently. And I rejoice over the incredible team of doctors and scientists. But I'm telling you that between now and 18 months, there's going to be loss and grief and hurt and pain like an ocean wave. I grew up here in Florida, so I've always been around the water. And people in drowning situations have said it's not the first wave that knocks you down. The surfers over in Titusville near Ron John's surf shop, Kelly Slater and those guys. It's not the first wave that drowns you. It's the never-ending waves that wear you out until you're too tired to fight anymore. Complicated grief will come in wave after wave after wave after wave after wave. I'm going to give you a life jacket and a lifeboat. Those are the tools that you need to be able to get through wave after wave after wave. You say, well, this sounds pretty depressing. And we go deeper into the U shape, deeper into the valley. Don't get depressed. This is unprecedented. This is new. Pandemics are not new to the world, but they're new to us. And the good news is a fantastic group of people, absolutely free at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia. Maybe you've been there. When you go to cdc.gov or you go to coronavirus.gov, you'll find trusted tools and information to be able to give you what you need in your leadership, in your work with coworkers. CDC released their protocols on opening phase 1 for schools, restaurants, businesses. It's a very helpful tool. cdc.gov, or when you go to cdc.gov/coronavirus 2019 daily life coping, managing stress, anxiety, you'll see it on your screen. And there are resources from the best thinkers in the country. The good news is it's rumor free, it's gossip free. It's not something your cousin posted on Facebook. I heard that if you take hot tea and you drink it sideways, that you won't get it. Listen, those are just rumors. So get the medical information from trusted sources. And that's why this behavioral hospital is giving you mental health information, because they're a trusted source here in Central Florida. And it's life-saving. We're on week 6. As we're recording this, you may be listening at a different point on the timeline. But during some of the darkest days of the United States Civil War, which up until now, when people say, what do you compare COVID-19 to? Is it like 9/11? And I worked with a response team, a crisis response team on the Pile in New York City. Is it like Y2K? No. Is it like the 2008 Great Recession? No. There's 2 things you can compare COVID to. And remember, we're only on week 6. But there's 2 things you can compare it to. And one would be the Great Depression. During the Great Depression, unemployment was right at 50%. 50%, that was across the country. The cities were hit far worse. And that was a 10-year crisis. The American Civil War was over 4 years of crisis. And the part I want you to know is the entire country was torn apart. Everything was different. And Abraham Lincoln said, next to creating a life, the finest thing a man can do is to save one. So as you're listening today, I hope you have a notepad. I hope that you have something to be able to guide you through and just write down the parts that apply to you. As Gabby said, there are tremendous resources, over 100 pages of tools, action steps, how to help kids, how to deal with coworkers, scared people that are going back to work, what happens if I get coronavirus, how to plug back into healing community, because you heal better in community than you do individually. Well, there's over 100 pages at the Central Florida Behavioral website, because we want to give you tools. We want to resource you. But I want you to know, when Abraham Lincoln said, one of the finest things you can do is to save a life, that's what we're doing today. We're going to give you tools to be able to protect you during these wave after wave after wave after wave of loss and hurt and fear. Now, if you drop a rock into a pond, you're going to see that it ripples out. And it ripples out and it ripples out. When I reference the Great Depression, there's a book called The Grapes of Wrath that John Steinbeck had kind of put him on the map. His parents had wanted him to go in a different direction, and he wanted to be a writer. And he went to Oklahoma during some of the worst of the Great Depression, and he saw unbelievable poverty. He saw it in Southern California, Middle and Northern California on the farms. And it was one of his greatest works, but it was simply because he was tracking the anguish of people. Loss after loss after loss. The ripples just keep coming. So how do we manage that? Because basic needs have been completely disrupted by the coronavirus and the COVID trauma. When I say basic needs, here they are. Needs of safety and trust, needs of control and esteem, needs of intimacy, and being able to look at that. When you hear intimacy, I don't want you to hear Victoria's Secret. Intimacy is a sense of connection, to be able to feel close to people. Social isolation and social distancing has left people feeling completely empty. Mother Teresa, on her last visit to the United States, said her greatest concern for this country was loneliness, because people, she said, feel so disconnected. Esteem is a sense of worth. Like late last night, I got a text message from a businessman that I've worked with through some transitions, and he said, my company just laid me off. What happens to the workaholic whose job is their identity? It takes away a sense of esteem. It's manageable. It's just another loss. The feeling of control. If you want one thing that'll help you through this time without panic. I didn't say anxiety or worry, because there's a lot of things to be concerned about. But if you want one thing that will protect you and help you from panic disorder, that will protect your sleep, and by the way, sleep is one of the greatest indicators. When you talk to friends, family, individuals, and you say, wow, what's going on? Ask them about their sleep. Ask them about their sleep. Because if somebody's sleeping well, it means they have surrendered control. They're in the part of the serenity prayer that I pray every day about acceptance. Basic needs of trust. Can I trust my government? Can I trust it's safe to go to Publix? Because if people don't feel safe, people don't go outside and businesses suffer. And we've seen that. And we're going to continue to see that. Because when I think about the different losses, I want you to think about you, the people that you love, the people you care about, people in your circles, how many of them have been in situations where they've lost a job, they've lost income, their companies have been closed. Maybe they work at a small business. Maybe they own a hair salon. Can you imagine? They've been closed for over a month and will be closed at least another week. For safety, I get that part. But what about the landlord when the rent comes due at the first of the month? Let me tell you some things about family problems during COVID lockdown. It's been extreme. And it's not because COVID made these families worse. It made the teenagers rebel. It made things happening between husbands and wives and adult children and their parents. You say, well, COVID is making all those relationships bad. No, COVID, the major crisis, just exposed what was already there. Crisis was there. The crisis revealed the character issues. If you've ever been whitewater rafting, you know that the big rocks are always there, but if they let water out of the dam, if there's a lot of rainwater, snow melt coming down, and there's a lot of water, you don't see the rocks, but the rocks are always there. And the relationship problems were always there too, health problems. One of the big challenges that I've been tracking are young women who are about to have a baby because they aren't having it in hospitals because they're terrified and they're afraid that they'll have a COVID exposure to their newborn. Doctors' offices and private facilities, basically think general practitioners, their business is down about 60% in 6 weeks. Many of them are laying people off. And you say, no, healthcare workers, they can always get a job. No, if people are afraid to go to their family doctor, if they're afraid to go to the OBGYN, if they're afraid to go for a routine checkup with the dermatologist, you know what happens? That office closes and the health problems go untreated. It's a different type of loss and can lead to other problems. But look at the lost friends, the lost graduations. And I know it sounds sad. Remember, we're still going down the U. We'll climb back out, I promise. But what about the kids who lost their childhood? One of the things that I hope that we can share with you in the next few weeks before school starts back in August, should it start back, is to talk about COVID anxiety in childhood, because these children won't have a childhood like you to be able to say, well, let's just go to the beach and we'll go to a theme park and let's just go to the movies. Things that you took for granted, those things are gone for a while. Some of them may be gone forever. And what do you do with those children if you're the mom, if you're the dad, if you're the grandparent? What do you say to someone who will never see their best buddy from 4th grade ever again? Because mom lost her job and they're having to move to Ohio to live with the grandparents. What do you say when they're never going to see their friend ever again? Just a different type of loss. Relationship problems right now are significant. If you've been locked down with someone you do not care for and someone who you're in the type of situation where it was kind of rough before. When I look at this, there are 8 levels of relationship coming out of lockdown, 8 different layers. But if you don't have the right tools, then what happens? The relationship fails. I think we're going to see a flood, at least that's what some of the forensic experts tell me. They project a flood of divorces when the courts open up again sometime in June, because so many people say, I've been locked down with you for a month, and this is not a good relationship. And I've had a lot of time to think. And so I'm not going to spend the rest of my life feeling locked down with someone who's so dysfunctional. 5 layers. When you look at a relationship, dangerous, that's the abuse level. Then there's dysfunctional, functional, there's fun and kind of flirty, but there's also a fulfilling level because some marriages got stronger. Some relationships got better. But what about people facing major illness alone? Cancer alone. What about that kind of loss? You may have seen this on Twitter where a college professor talked about his dad, Donald John. He said he was born on October 30, 1932, and he passed away 12:07 p.m., April 1, 2020. They were New York Yankee fans, but Dad died alone. Don died in a hospital by himself because he had COVID-19, and you're not allowed on a unit. The office manager here at the LifeWorks group where I work in Winter Park, her husband had a heart attack and was at the heart unit, the cardiologist unit at Advent Health on Rollins Street in the College Park area. And she couldn't see him during all of that because of COVID. And what about the people whose moms and dads are dying alone and the loss that they feel and the pain that they feel? Job problems are going to be significant because companies are trying to figure out how do we open with maybe 50% of the staff. How do we open with maybe 50% or less of the customers? How do we maintain profitability in a day and an age where we've got to provide masks, gloves, and we have to wipe down? It's significant challenges. And some people, if they're in a strong company, that company will get better during a time of crisis. The crisis, because of strong leadership, the crisis will reveal that they were well-funded and well-structured. Now watch the opposite of that. The opposite of that, what if I have a leader who's not a very good leader? What if I have someone who's in the type of situation and they're just not skilled to deal with crisis? The old saying is true. People don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. And I think that we're going to see a number of different job problems that occur and things that pop up. And I think that those things will lead to many people going through some type of career change. I think that entrepreneurs will step up, but I also think it'll be a time of significant career readjustment where people say, I'm not just going to work to have a job, to pay the rent, to have a roof over my head so I can come home, eat some Doritos, watch Jimmy Kimmel, and then wake up tomorrow to go to a job I don't like. The job problems and the long-term shutdown will expose a number of different indicators. But remember, it's a different type of loss because some of those coworkers you may never see again, and some of them may have been close friends. Some people's closest friends are at work. If you saw the NBC television show The Office, you know how Michael Scott, his best friends were his coworkers. What happens if my company shuts down, like some of those companies I told you in bankruptcy, with Neiman Marcus being the most recent this morning? What do I do if I don't see those folks again? Because now my social support system is removed. For some people, it's the money. For the single moms, it always is. There's a podcast I listened to that talks about how single moms can manage and remove their debt in a year with a foundation. It's the coolest thing because the guy that started it, who's very wealthy, his mom was a single mom, and she always had envelopes and she'd keep money in. And sometimes when his friends would come over, if they drank all the milk, he knew Scotty just drank all the milk and we're not going to have any milk this week because mom keeps her cash in envelopes. The envelope method is very effective, but if you're feeling lost or hopeless or terrified, you're not alone. Over 23 million are unemployed. Will that number grow? Some experts say the recession will go on for almost 2 years, and it will not just be in the United States. No, the recession will be global. It will influence us, but it will not end us. We're still going down into the U shape. Hang on. And the reason that I trust Central Florida Behavioral is because during extended times like this, you'll see addictions, abuse, gambling addiction, pornography addiction, people with sexual addictions, drug, alcohol, opioids, People get so overwhelmed, they just want to die. And the suicide rate goes up because they feel so traumatized. They feel so terrorized. And then there's my friend Daniel Amen. He's the one in the picture on the right. That's his daddy. His dad, Lewis, died Wednesday night. Daniel is a double board certified psychiatrist. He practices in Costa Mesa, California. He's an author. I'm sure you've seen his TED Talks or seen him on the Dr. Oz television show. And I'm sure that you've seen when he's on PBS, he does a special every year. His newest special, called The End of Mental Illness, based on his New York Times bestselling book, was slotted to launch in the middle of March. PBS put it on hold because of the shutdown. Dr. Amen loves being a psychiatrist, and the Washington Post said he's the most popular psychiatrist in the country. But his dad got COVID because some well-meaning people from a church came to check on him because they wanted to make sure they were okay. Daniel's mom still has the coronavirus. So far, she has survived, but his dad died Wednesday night. We're talking about complicated grief because loss on top of loss on top of loss. Oh, yeah. And Daniel has 9 offices around the United States, 9 different Amen clinics, and they had to lay off half the staff because everything that's happening with the type of work that they do involves close in-person contact, the different scans and such. Loss on top of loss on top of loss. I feel that too. When I teach on complicated grief, I understand it. That photo you see, that's at the highest point, second highest point in the state of Florida. It's in Lake Wales. It's at a place called the Box Singing Tower. And it's just a beautiful place, 150-acre park. If you've never been, you ought to go. That's my daddy. Because he has dementia, and for years on Sundays, I take care of my dad. But because I work in psychological first response, instead of every Sunday going on, we call them Ice Cream Adventures with Dad. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see the Ice Cream Adventures until 6 weeks ago. Every week, doing something different with Dad, and it makes him so happy. He fell asleep, and I took that picture because I said, Dad, and I realized, he's asleep. I'm just going to let him rest. There was a bench. And I thought one day I'll say goodbye to my dad too. He worked 2 jobs when I was a kid because he didn't have a high school degree. He always worked and provided. I haven't seen him in 6 weeks. He's alive. My mom, great caregiver, my sister, they haven't gone out. They have groceries delivered from Publix, but I miss him, right? We're talking about grief. Now remember, the grief is normal. The loss is normal. What happens when it becomes abnormal? We call that complicated grief. And with complicated grief, intense grief is typical when we lose someone or something. And when I think about that, I believe everybody listening is affected in some way. I believe that everybody listening right now, you're on this webinar, I think you've been impacted by some layer of loss on top of loss on top of loss. You see, it's the multiplication. It's the multiplication of the grief and the loss. And COVID-19, the pandemic, is loss on top of loss on top of loss. It's wave on top of wave. The grief remains until we adapt, until we evolve. I'm going to teach you in this training and some others coming up. I'm going to teach you how to evolve, how to flow. And when you learn how to do that, when you learn how to swim in those big waves, you'll build a confidence and a strength that is unshakable. But for today, is to look right now at the 10 to 15% of bereaved people. Now remember, this is the data from the International Critical Stress Foundation in Baltimore, where I'm an instructor. This is the data from Johns Hopkins, the Centers for Disease Control. This is not COVID data. On a normal day, 10 to 15% of the population have had a major loss. Now, women are at a higher risk than men. That's a normal day. I would double or triple that right now. I would say it's 1 in 3 in the United States who are dealing with complex and complicated layer upon layer of grief and loss. On a typical day, pre-COVID, 20% of the people receiving mental health treatment had unrecognized complicated grief. And the typical depression type of agenda, okay, this person has depression, so here's the protocol. Here's what we're going to follow. It doesn't work with complicated grief. They don't get better. And if they don't get better, then what happens? Sometimes people say, well, let's just give them more medicine or try this or try that. It's because they had the wrong diagnosis. I'll show you that in a minute, but what are the signs of pandemic grief? It's hard to focus on normal tasks. Maybe you forget your car keys and now you're forgetting everything. If you've seen a lot of Zoom meetings, you know that some people are forgetting their pants. If you really need to laugh, look up Zoom fail on social media, and you'll see that unless you click the blue button that says leave meeting, the camera is still on. And apparently a lot of people, they dress from the top up like they were going to their regular work at home, but from the bottom down, not so much. Well, you say, well, how could they forget to do that? Because coronavirus and pandemic panic stops your prefrontal cortex. You can't think clearly in a critical incident. The terrorist attacks of 9/11 was a half a day. It started in New York City a little after 9 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. Before 11 o'clock in the morning, when a United flight crashed in a field in Pennsylvania because the passenger said, no, we're taking this plane back from the terrorist. They did something very American that day. Todd Beamer, who led the charge, they voted, are we going to take back the plane? They were in the rear galley, 38 of them. And then they held hands and they prayed the Lord's Prayer. That's pretty American, freedom of religion. And then they took the beverage cart and as many containers of hot water as they could get, and they stormed the cockpit. I know that because Lisa Beamer, Todd's wife, had a chance to spend an hour with. He was the one that said, let's roll. You see, you in a crisis either get incredibly laser focused and it brings the best out of you, or if pandemic grief and complicated grief get in the way, you can't think. You can't function. You're sleeping all the time, feelings of anger, irritability, headaches, upset stomach, fatigue, low energy. You keep re-experiencing the loss, and maybe it's a job or a relationship. Maybe you lost a loved one to suicide. The levels are higher than they've been in any time that we've tracked them. And I think when lockdown ends, because there's so many lonely people, I believe that when landlords start checking who hasn't paid their rent, that we're going to see many people who simply died at home. They just gave up. They drowned. Remember, we're on a U-shape. It goes down. It'll come back up. Engaging in activities such as eating, drinking, online shopping to cope. My sister, I love her. She sends me funny stuff on my cell phone, those little gifts. And one of them was, you should wear your face mask inside, ... It'll keep you from eating so much. Well, some people are using food to cope. Other people turn to drugs or prescription drugs to avoid thinking about. I don't want to think about pandemic. I won't make it go away. This is going to be with us for 18 to 20 months. We're on week 6. What's the cost? Personal anguish, suffering, economic, social, political, philosophical changes. Higher education. I mean, for the first time since 1635, Harvard University will not be open in the fall. It will be online. The University of Central Florida's second largest campus in the United States will make the announcement on July 15 if they will be open for classes. But the thought is, because University of Florida, other Florida universities will use the same time frame. The thought is they will not be open for classes in the fall. And if the higher education is not open, is it likely that Orange County Public Schools, the 9th largest school district in the United States, will take a risk with hundreds of thousands of little boys and little girls? Lots of change. Those are losses. Social networks get overloaded. I don't mean the social network like Facebook. I mean every network. We heal in small groups of community. Immunity will boost in small groups of community. That's why Central Florida Behavioral Hospital has small groups. You could do it online. We need small groups of community. We heal in small group. Humans were not designed to live alone. John Milton in the 1600s, during a pandemic, the Middle Ages knew those very well, said, no man is an island. No man lives alone. Isolation, desperation. John Milton had it right. You're not to live in this world by yourself. But when I look at work and motivation, there is no work. And people feel depleted. Even if they like their job and they still have a job, they have no energy. Loss of community connections. And society starts to weaken and fall apart. Now, I already told you, I grew up in Central Florida. Maybe you're one of my neighbors. Maybe we went to school together at Rollins or Valencia Community College. Maybe you were there when Walt Disney World opened in October 1971, like my wife and I. Now, we weren't married. We were just kids. It would be 8 years until we were in college that I would be able to convince her that I was the best choice. She may have questioned that once or twice over the last 35 years, but I love Florida. I just love Central Florida. I love my state. But would you look at the image that was snapped from the Fox television affiliate in Tampa Bay? Do you notice something weird about that bridge? Notice how on the right side, if it was directional, you would say, oh, okay, that's on the land side. That's on the side that goes to St. Petersburg. By the way, this is the Bay Bridge between St. Petersburg and Bradenton, Florida. It goes over Tampa Bay. Notice how at the tallest span on the southbound side, headed toward Naples and Sarasota, the bridge is gone. And you say, well, what in the world happened? On May the 9th in 1980, see the barge down below? In a microburst that was at 70 to 80 mile an hour winds, that barge hit the south side and took the bridge down. There's another aerial shot you can see. I mean, the barge hit it and it took the bridge down and took down with it 35 people on that Greyhound bus. Now you'll notice the car that had a former Major League Baseball player. He was able to stop in time. But that's what the bridge looked like. It just went away. And you say, well, it's because the barge hit it. No, it's because a lot of things had happened to it. Listen, you don't know the story until you know the backstory. And when you're dealing with patients or clients who have complex issues and complicated grief, I told you that's why so many clinicians miss it and just label it as depression. And why typical depression, cognitive behavioral therapy, or antidepressants just don't work on this population. A lot of things had happened in the 12 months prior to that barge hitting it. There was a Coast Guard cutter that hit that span. It's one of the largest disasters of the Coast Guard in the history of Florida. Here's the principle, and I want you to understand. Because the principle is you never see the fall, you only see the crash, right? You say, oh, there's the crash. No, there's a backstory. And when you're dealing with patients or clients, maybe it's in an inpatient setting like Central Florida Behavioral, or maybe it's in an outpatient setting in your office. Maybe you're a psychiatric nurse or a social worker and you're in private practice. I want you to know you have to get to the story if you're going to heal complicated grief. Remember, I promised you a timeline. Because sometimes one of the ways to deal with the anxiety, the doubt, the insecurity is to be able to say what comes next. If you've ever read stories to little kids or grandkids, and they say, Daddy, read me a story. I used to love that when my kids were little. I wish I had known an artist named Kenny Chesney back then. He wrote a song called Don't Blink. Don't blink because your babies will be grown and they'll have babies of their own. But back when the kids were little and they say, read me a story, everybody likes a story. And what was weird is they really like stories they'd already heard before, because during fearful times, people like comfort. That's why individuals are watching on Disney Plus or Hulu. They're watching old shows on Netflix they've already seen. Why? It gives them a feeling of control. Because the pandemic has brought job loss, financial fears. We're just getting started on the recession. We won't fully know the extent of how bad it is because recessions come. Economists use letters to describe them. A V-shaped recession is what they were talking about back in March. It goes down quick and the economy comes back quick. A U-shaped recession, it goes down quick and then it takes about as long on the flat bottom part, but doesn't get any worse. And then it takes a while to climb back out. a U shape. Those are typically a year. And then there's an L shape. We saw that in 2008, the Great Recession. It goes down quick. If you take the L, turn it sideways, it goes down quick. And then if you angle the L, it takes a long time to climb out. That recession took almost 10 years across the 7 major industries and streams of influence in the United States. 7 major industries, 22,000 subcategories. If you know the categories and where you fit, you can negotiate it very well. This recession, they're calling a W. Because a W, if you look at the letter, it goes down and it starts to come back up. That's the second wave. And then it goes down, and maybe this will be a W that bounces and bounces, and we don't know how long until the Surgeon General said we have a vaccine. Social distancing, quarantine, feelings of isolation have elevated the grief and the loss. Changes in daily habits and routines. You can't go to your gym or yoga studio. All the special plans and events that have been canceled for graduations, birthdays. Oh yeah, Sundays, Mother's Day. If your mom is older like mine, I'll have some things delivered, and I'll talk to her on the phone on FaceTime, and I'll miss my mom. My parents are still alive. But being able to know that Mother's Day, and if you've been distant with your mom, call your mom on Sunday. She'll be happy to hear from you. A friend of mine whose mom is in a nursing home, and he can do nothing, but I said, yeah, you can, because she has dementia. She wouldn't really understand FaceTime, but she likes coloring. I said, go to Publix and get a Hallmark card and send some coloring pages. You know, don't send the book, just tear some out, and your mom will like it. And he said, Dwight, thanks. My mom really liked that. Our habits have changed, our special events. Family members are fighting a lot. 2 types of people come out of COVID lockdown. Ones that are going to be very cautious, wearing face masks, gloves, practicing physical distancing, and the guidelines given by the Centers for Disease Control. And the other group, I think, are going to stand in a crowd because they are tired of isolation. That's why there may be a second wave. Worries about how to pay rent, utilities. How are you going to pay your mortgage and your student loans? That's a loss. Sadness over the world that has changed, and that's totally normal. Are you afraid for the future? Yeah, I felt that before. Because I told you normal died, but then there's one called anticipatory grief. And that's feeling that the greater loss is yet to come, and I'll help you with it a little bit. There's greater losses to come. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just telling you, we have nothing to compare this to unless you go back in history to the 1930s or go back in history to the 1860s. But if you want to leave the United States and go to other parts of the world that deal with pandemic, we can learn from them. That's why the World Health Organization and other groups say, here's how we did it. And I can tell you, it's a really cool thing that happens during major crisis, because red states and blue states in a major crisis, they become United States. And people that didn't like each other before because of political opinion and bias, when everybody's lost everything, and I've seen this after multiple hurricanes here in Florida, neighbors get to learn neighbors and communities come together. Now watch the process. I put it at the top of the page. Change. I think we all agree the COVID pandemic has brought unparalleled change. Change brings loss, and loss brings pain, and pain brings grief. And if I added another category, but I think it's a different webinar for a different day, grief can bring growth. These very painful things that are happening, there's a whole session that we could do on how to find, in the middle of all the brokenness, how do you find the 1 or 2 good pieces to rebuild? Well, you have to know the timeline. As you'll see on your screen, if you're listening to the audio, there's a disaster stage, a recovery stage, a rebuilding stage. Now, this is typically what we see after a tornado, a school shooting, a mass shooting in a workplace, or at a concert like Las Vegas, or just at a nightclub in a family neighborhood like Pulse. There's a disaster, and then things start to recover, and then things start to rebuild. Here's the problem. The timeline of community disaster is typically hours to maybe, if it's Hurricane Dorian, maybe it's 4 days, because that was a very slow-moving hurricane, one of the slowest in history. That's why it decimated the Bahamas. This disaster phase has gone into week 6. And I'm projecting, with the data that I have access to, another 7 weeks that will be in stage 1. Stage 2 is recovery. You'll notice that takes days to weeks. Yeah, we're going to extend that because the recovery phase, when things start to come back, just keep adding days and weeks and months to it. The rebuilding phase is normally months to years. And so when will we be fully recovered? What's a good projection that I can go to see the big ball drop in New York City on New Year's Eve, if that was on your bucket list? Maybe you wanted to go to the Super Bowl. Maybe you wanted to be able to take your family and go to someplace, a big concert. Elton John farewell tour with 100,000 of your closest friends. When will people do that again? 2023, 24. You said, Dwight, it's 2020 right now. That's like years from now. That's right. That's right. When you look at the timeline, and don't be scared, this is the typical, the graph will just show, these are the phases of disaster response. If you look where it says warning, impact, honeymoon, where it drops off is March 11, 2020. It's still dropping currently, and it's still dropping, but eventually the second disaster will come. I'm projecting it will be far more mental health crisis than it will be medical crisis with COVID cases. A lot of people will understand physical distancing. A lot of people will pay attention. Some won't, and they'll get sick and make other people sick, and that's irresponsible. I'll just say it, and I'm not your mother. Call your mother on Mother's Day. I'm not your mother, but be responsible. Don't make other people sick. That's absurd. Be responsible with your health. But the big challenge we're going to see in the second wave, I fully believe it'll be mental health. I do not believe, even though I'm thankful, Gabby said, there are hundreds of you taking time out. Thank God for you. I want to give you tools, resources. That's why the Central Florida Behavioral website has over 100 pages of tools and resources. There's no cost for that. Take it, download it, print it, share it with friends and family. There are not enough trained people helpers. Picture a giant tsunami, 100-foot wave coming, racing toward Florida at 60 miles an hour, 100 feet tall. It'll decimate things. And we don't have enough lifeguards. And we don't have enough life jackets. I don't have enough people on the beach, but because of you. And I wish you were here in my study here in Winter Park so that I could say thank you. Thank you for picking up some skills and some tools, because mental health triage, this is the model that we used after the terrorist attacks. The photo in the background, that's the Pentagon. Even though my team worked on ground zero in New York City, in the financial district of the city, a chaplain who became an acquaintance of mine after the terrorist attacks sent me the picture that he took on a camera. Back then, phones really didn't have cameras. All right, triage. Blue, I need to see that patient within 2 hours. Green, 4 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour, 10 minutes. Red, that patient's going to die. In mental health, we can do the same thing, because there are symptoms when people are at not just grief, but it's loss after loss. Right? Those symptoms are trauma. Trauma is defined in the clinical literature as an emotional state of discomfort and stress because of memories, extraordinary, catastrophic experiences which made that person feel like they were going to be harmed. I would say we are there. Now, the typical traumas, car accidents and house fires and disability, loss of health, the loss of a child, drowning, are up. And Central Florida leads the country in numbers of drowning because we have so many people that relocate here and so many swimming pools, lakes, and canals and rivers. And it's so sad to deal with the families every week now that have lost a child because they're busy trying to work from home. They're trying to be able to do homeschool. They're trying to keep up with all the Zoom assignments that their kids' teachers give, and a 2-year-old wanders into the pool. But look at the other type of traumatic events, animal attacks, finding a body and being able to say, we were taking care of grandma and he died in the back bedroom. Domestic violence we talked about, but infidelity goes up. Divorce goes up, custody battles, job problems, companies downsizing. And that trauma is multiplied. It's impacted by how sudden. Very few people saw, I didn't, that COVID was going to influence our culture this way. But the more you've had past issues of trauma and loss, the greater connection you have to the people that have lost, the number of coping skills you have or don't have, the support system you have or don't have, your faith system, and your culture. Some cultures understand. See, I grew up in a multicultural neighborhood here in Central Florida because my parents didn't have high school education. And many of our neighbors had come from Cuba when Fidel Castro took over, and they left Cuba when Batista fell with nothing but the clothes on their back. And in their culture, it was, we will work our way out of this. So I grew up in an entrepreneurial, multicultural neighborhood on South Orange Blossom Trail. I understand it. I don't like it when bad things happen, but okay. But see, that's a trauma factor of how well you will manage through the traumatic layers of grief and loss. The multiple events, if you lost your job, if you're losing your house, if your marriage partner is leaving, right? Your prior mental and physical health. Did you see things? Did you see a body? The protracted nature of this event makes it worse. The picture you see, by the way, is 1929. That's when Black Monday, the Great Depression. Look at the bottom, the age. I want to pour into you and give you skills and tools to deal with children, because the children of COVID that'll be going to school, or maybe still going to school on video, they have nothing to compare this to. What is your ability to manage and build resilience? Because each trauma is like a brick in a wall. And eventually it builds a wall of numbness, and it leads to mental health challenges like complicated grief, anxiety, depression, or self-destructive behavior like alcoholism, rage, and suicide. COVID has some extreme emotional distress. You'll see them on the screen: anxiety, irritability. And then there's grief, anger, mood swings. And then look at the bottom. Many people have not heard, unless you work in the crisis field, you're not familiar with the term, post-traumatic stress. Everybody in the COVID-19 has post-traumatic stress. Secondary traumatic stress is most people. I'll explain that in a moment. Severe cognitive dysfunction, that's when we're making a referral. You're calling the admissions center at Central Florida Behavioral. People dealing with panic attacks, they're just unable to function. And at the bottom, do you see where it says complex PTSD, CPTSD, very hard to treat and very life-threatening. Because when people have it, they go into behavioral dysfunction, abuse with alcohol, drugs, compulsive acts like gambling or pornography or spending, eating disorders. They don't take showers anymore. They have major sleep problems, and they're on the path of slow suicide. They can't function. Cognitive distress during COVID, they lose track of time. What day is it? Suicide starts to look like an option because they get preoccupied with the event and their inability to function. And for some people, their core beliefs are shattered. The world should be fair. I never thought this would happen. I thought my government would keep me safe. I thought my leaders would keep me safe. But I told you before, so many times complicated grief comes along with something called catatonic depression. Again, highly resistant to outpatient treatment. That's why you need inpatient options and resources and trusted referral sources, because it's a type of depression where somebody cannot function. Psychogenic amnesia is one of the subcategories there. So what do? U-shape. Remember I said get better? All right, let's climb our way out. With the help of Rollins College graduate Fred Rogers, where he met his wife, Joanne. I'm a huge Fred Rogers fan, even though I never met him, but I'm a huge fan. Because Mr. Rogers could take a complex thing in his own way and explain it to 5-year-olds. He said it takes strength to face our sadness and our grief and let our grief and our anger flow in tears when they need to. It takes strength to talk about feelings. It takes strength to reach out for help and comfort when we need it. And friend, I don't know about you, but I need it. Now watch the layers. Stress response is everybody listening and everybody you know. COVID is that big. Cumulative stress, that's everybody listening, everybody you know. Exhaustion, depletion, I hope you're practicing self-care, because if not, it goes to burnout, acute stress disorder, complicated grief, post-traumatic stress disorder, complex post-traumatic stress, and then people get self-destructive and then they die. Now remember, PTSD is a neurological condition. It's because of what's happened to you. It's not something wrong with you. It's a brain injury. That's a SPECT scan from my friend Daniel Amen. Secondary traumatic stress is trying to keep you alive. It's like, wow, did you hear? Be cautious about rumors. That's why I want you to get information from cdc.gov or coronavirus.gov and not from Facebook cousins. And PTSD is because of too much. So what is the DSM? If you're not familiar with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual from the American Psychiatric Association, we use the 5th edition revised. Persistent complex bereavement disorder. Look at some of the highlights. Intense sorrow or distress that does not improve over time. It's like, you'll be better over time. No, they won't. Not without treatment. They get detached. They get isolated. Persistent feelings of loneliness or emptiness. And this goes on for a prolonged period. And that's why that timeline is so significant. Because if you go back in time, to a major event about a month before COVID. Kobe Bryant and his daughter were killed in a helicopter crash in the mountains of Southern California. That was a TV special that was done by a TV host that had only met Kobe once. But she said, I'm a daughter of a daddy, and a daddy who loves his girl. And the whole country mourned, and the whole country was feeling pain and loss because of somebody, and for most of us, somebody we'd never met. She's a journalist, and she'd only met him once, and that's when she was in college. And we all felt pain. Can you imagine the pain of all the little girls who've lost daddies who were first responders, police, fire, medical, ER docs, nurses, helicopter pilots? Those little girls lost their daddy too. And when I look at dealing with grief and loss, that was in February. And now we are dealing with what's called the prolonged grief disorder in some diagnostic manuals. I already told you about persistent complex bereavement disorder. Stress-related disorder is the subcategory that it goes under if you're a clinician. If you're not, the World Health Organization simply calls it prolonged grief disorder. It does not get better by itself. It's a differential diagnosis. I told you, because it's most often confused with depression and treated incorrectly. That's why you need skilled clinicians to be able to say, this person has the wrong diagnosis. If somebody comes in and they have an issue with blood or their thyroid or their adrenals because they're so stressed and burned out, and somebody says, I think what you need is some of this changes to your diet. You get a wrong diagnosis, you're never going to get better. The core symptoms of complicated grief are persistent yearning and preoccupation with the loss. Now, it says deceased, but maybe you didn't lose a loved one, but you've lost everything else. Complicated grief is not depression, but it does have similar conditions. And maybe you or somebody that you love, you think, this is why they never get better. And this was before COVID-19. My brother died when he was killed by a drunk driver. Mom never got better. We know there are 16 to 20 million new mourners every year, right? Not quite 10% of the population. Now, that's new. Of those, 1 in 3 will have pathological patterns of grief. So you can see this is millions of people. That's before a pandemic. And that's before the pandemic, not counting all the other people that are influenced and affected. So what is complicated grief? It blocks the ability to function normal, troubling thoughts, avoidance of reminders, the difficulty in managing painful emotions because they just can't. They don't have the horsepower. And they'll say, I just can't function. When I go back to that, remember, emotions are a strong, uncontrollable urge during acute grief because that prefrontal cortex, that front part of the brain where we do our executive functioning, it starts to get foggy and it starts to get so clouded and confused. So people try to find a way to balance the pain by doing other things or distracting themselves. And for some people, they choose socially acceptable ways to distract, right? So socially acceptable would be online shopping. Socially acceptable would be to overeat. Well, I'm just eating a lot. I'm just baking a lot. But really they're using calories to try to calm mood. That won't work. But then there are socially unacceptable. And that's where you get into online gambling, which right now, even though the casinos are closed and the cruise lines are shut down, and you say, well, online gambling and casino gambling must not be bad. No, I talked to the person in charge of the state who says it's epidemic levels because it's not regulated online. And there are people literally losing their homes because socially unacceptable, that would be marijuana if they don't have a medical permit. That would be pornography. Socially unacceptable ways to cope, that would be the rage of venting horrible things to a child that you say you love because you're stressed over losing your job. And then you apologize to a 7-year-old and you say, well, I'm sorry, I hurt your feelings. All the 7-year-old is going to remember is the name you called them. Why would people do that? Why would they do that to a child? Emotional and verbal abuse is mental cruelty. Why would they do it? They can't manage their emotions. Why? Their prefrontal cortex is not working. Why? Because they're so overwhelmed with grief and hurt and pain and stress and loss. And there's another 16 to 18 months of intensity. The big waves will be here in 6 to 7 weeks, according to the timelines that I'm following. I have to get you ready. Grief is the process of experiencing psychological, behavioral, social, and physical reactions. Now, notice this. Therese Rando is the leading researcher in modern times dealing with complicated grief. And Therese said it's about the perception of loss. Now, that's why I need you to do something timeless. Give us this day our daily bread is an old prayer. Give us this day. Now, what is that about? It means live in the moment. It means to be able to live in the moment. Because if you start to worry about, well, what's going to happen with the 2020 election and what's going to happen if Disney World doesn't open? I'll tell you, if Disney World does not open well, the projection is maybe July of 2020. If Disney World is not a safe place, if Central Florida gets it wrong, the whole world will be scared. Because the whole world came here. We have the #1 tourist destination globally. Walt Disney World, the happiest place on earth. One of the happiest places for my family. We'd stand in front of the ice cream shop and watch the fireworks over Cinderella's castle. If it's safe to do that, the world, not just the country, will breathe a sigh of relief, and 110,000 people will get their jobs back, and the airport will open, and conventions will happen again, and our kids that are younger than about the age of 10, when they're growing up, they'll go, COVID, I kind of heard of that. They won't have much context because the greatest generation, you, me, Vicki Lewis, and other community leaders, we're going to help our community heal, and we're going to help our community get through this. And the kids years from now will say, just like kids who can remember Grandpa talking about the Great Depression, here's what we did, and we got through it better together. #Stronger_together was trending on Twitter. I like that because one of us is not as strong as all of us. Because when we're in this together, you know what happens? We all feel courage. It's about the perception of loss, Dr. Rando said. Grief is experienced 4 major ways: psychologically, behaviorally, socially, and physically. Some people will feel it more with crushing back pain. They'll have gastrointestinal distress, unbelievable headaches, maybe chest pain. Socially, they just don't know how to deal with people anymore. What if you work in an office, an insurance agency, and people are going to come in? And what if they're not wearing a mask? Behaviorally, and then psychologically, your ability to think clearly. My friend Norm Wright's a great researcher on grief, one of the pioneers in that field. He taught me this in 2004. They had a special needs son named Matthew who died when he was 19. He was never able to function in the adult world, but they loved him so dearly. Oh yeah, they only had 2 children. His daughter at the time was an opioid addict. She was selling her body for drugs when Matthew died. And some of his friends said, how you doing, Norm? And he said, I sketched this thing out. And he said, it's like a big ball of grief. Maybe you've seen it before, but instead of saying, well, what's grief about? It's about all of that: depression, rage, anxiety, confusion, panic, apathy, sorrow, anguish, emptiness, despair, fear, inadequacy, rejection, bitterness, abandonment, rage. One of the families that I talked to whose son committed suicide, second week of this, now going into 7 weeks, because he had perfect credit score and he realized the stock market crash was going to hurt his perfect credit, and he felt like he had failed and he had no reason to live because he'd always had perfect credit, and he took his own life. He put a tube into the exhaust of an old pickup truck, and his dad found him. You see, if you don't pull the plug out of the middle of that big ball, Norm taught me, if you don't pull the plug out, it gets big. So today, friend, I'm pulling the plug out. Grief is all of those. There are a little over 4,000 emotions we have in the English language to describe how humans feel and behave. Most of us limited to happy, mad, sad, glad. But I want you to know, the more we can pull out the plug, the more you can say, like me, this is really sad. Some days are really stressful. Here's how I cope. How are you coping? If you don't pull the plug out of the middle, you'll find yourself weepy, unable to function, or worse. When I talked about timelines, sometimes this is a tool that I use. If you're a clinician, please take this, use it with your patients and clients. You see, to do a trauma timeline of things that have impacted your life. You look at negative things, top 10 negative things. And his first book, Dr. Phil wrote, he talked about defining moments. It's a great exercise. What are the top 5 things that defined your life negatively? What are the top 5 or 10 things that defined your life positively? Where will COVID-19 go on your timeline? Will COVID on your timeline be a positive? Because maybe you made a positive change in a toxic situation. Maybe it'll be a positive because you decided to deal with credit card debt so that you could keep your money. To quote the financial guru on the talk radio stations, Dave Ramsey, in tough times, you do rice and beans, beans and rice, and you can pay it off. This is manageable. Is COVID going to be a positive or a negative on your life timeline? I don't know. But the wisest Jewish king that ever lived said it this way: to everything there is a season, and there is a time, to every purpose under heaven. And you say, I think I've heard that before. This is on a little quote thing that my wife got at Hobby Lobby that we have in our kitchen, but it's a really good idea. If you feel like you've heard it before, then you're probably in my age bracket. There was a group in the early 1960s that had a song, for everything there is a season, turn, turn, turn. What's it about? Well, it's about seasons of life. I'm an author. And so if you have one chapter, what's going to happen to the hero? Well, don't give up. There'll be another chapter. There's a children's book that has been banned in every public library in the United States. It's called The Giving Tree. Shel Silverstein wrote it. And you say, well, wait a minute, Dwight, did you say it was banned? Yep, one of the top 5 banned books in public libraries, too. It's a children's book. And you say, why would they ban that? Shel grew out of a horribly broken childhood. If you're familiar with the ACEs score, if you're a family counselor, sociologist, marriage and family therapist, social worker, you know ACEs score tracks 10 major variables. And if you've had any of those 10 happen to you, you're traumatized, and it explains. So during a pandemic, when people say, well, that person's just a drug addict. No, that person's been traumatized. And drugs are how it comes out. Shel said the Giving Tree has a sad ending. To live is to age and to lose and to long. If you've never read it or you're not familiar with the book, it's about 20 pages. It's a simple concept. A little boy sees a tree and he says to the tree, can you give me an apple? I would love one of your apples. And the tree says, absolutely. Absolutely, I'll give you an apple. And then the boy comes back and says, can you give me another one? Sure. Can you give me another one? Pretty soon the tree's out of apples. The boy ages and says, I'm doing a craft project. I'd love to have your leaves. I could use every one of your leaves. And the tree says, okay, and gives him all the leaves. The boy comes back later. He's a little older. And the boy says, those branches would make some beautiful craft decorations that we're doing around the home, some wreaths. And can I have your branches? And the tree says, of course. The boy then comes back, now as a full-grown man, saying, I need some furniture. My family's growing, and can I cut you down? And the tree says, of course, I'll let you cut me down. Now, you say, Dwight, what a horrible story. Well, that's why Tracy Morgan and others say it's one of the toughest books to get through. Give and give and give. And at the very end of the book, there's a stump, and an old man comes and sits on it. You say, Dwight, why would you tell me this horrible story? Because life is about change, and change is about loss, and loss is about pain, and pain is about grief. Notice the difference between traumatic experiences and loss, right? Trauma impairs your concentration, but bereavement is disbelief and shock and numbness and searching, yearning, reminiscing. When's it going to get better? But see how those overlap? That's what we see in the clinical research. And they overlap because if you don't have some type of help, some type of guidance, it will prolong the grieving process. People go into shock trying to make sense of it. They don't have time for the losses. They don't have time to say goodbye. They don't have time to be able to say farewell to coworkers or friends or family. They can't go to the funeral. The family that lost their son to suicide had 6 children and lost one to suicide, and the other 5 could go to the funeral home because you could only have 10 people. What do you do when there's loss upon loss upon loss? See the bottom question? Yeah, don't go to that one. There's a question that people ask in a time of major catastrophe, and I've worked since Columbine around some very big and sad things. San Bernardino, the Marjorie Stone Douglas shooting in Parkland, Florida, of course, Pulse. And being able to see major loss after loss, I can tell you, there's no answer for why did this happen. Spend your energy on what can we do, right? Non-judgmental acceptance. I told you some relationships will break up. Families will break up, like that one. Family broke up, and a little boy named Julian lost his daddy because dad left with a woman named Yoko, and a man named Paul McCartney wrote a song called Hey Jude. Oh, by the way, that's the #1 song the Beatles ever had. It's the only song in the top 10 at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Because when you think about it, Paul McCartney said, what am I going to say to a little boy who's lost everything that he knows and his dad's never coming back? Hey, Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better. Remember to let her in your heart. That's when you can start to make it better. Hey, Jude, don't be afraid. You were made to go out and get her. The minute you let her under your skin, then you begin to make it better. And Paul wrote to his adopted nephew, Julian, and anytime you feel the pain, hey, Jude, refrain. Don't carry the world upon your shoulders. You see, when we're going through times like this, to be able to get through it, we look at the research and we understand, well, here's what to do next. Remember I told you, don't ask why, go to what? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the pioneer researcher, she was a Swiss-American psychiatrist, and she said, all of these losses will change you. Beautiful people don't just happen. All of these losses, when you climb your way out of the depths, these losses will redefine you. Now, we know she was dealing with terminally ill patients, not COVID patients, not pandemic patients. She was dealing with individuals who knew they were dying, and she had to walk them out of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, to acceptance. But this type of grief is different. Look at the grief responses in the chart. The event, where it says mild, moderate to severe, right? The event is still going on and will go on for another 7 weeks. In some industries, out of those 22,000 types of jobs, it will go on for up to 18 months. But for everybody, it'll go on for another 2. The people with resilience, they'll rebound in weeks. The people that have recovery skills will rebound in 1 year. But look at this. The individuals, everybody lived through the same thing. But the ones that have complicated grief, it gets worse 1 to 2 years from now than it was when it started. That's why we're training now, equipping you now, preparing you now, giving you tools and resources at the website now. Oh yeah, what about chronic? This is going to be the children, seniors, individuals that are too busy working right now to pay the rent. It's bad now, it's severe, and it will never get better until they have treatment. So what are the phases? We walk them from numbing through yearning and searching, disorganization and despair, into reorganizing their thoughts. I like children's books, as you can tell. I especially like children's books because it's an innocent way to open up emotion. There's one called Tear Soup by Pat Schwarbert. Tear Soup is just a little children's book, and it's about a grandma who goes through an unspeakable loss. And she's going to make a big pot, a big stew of tear soup, and let the pain out. Sometimes books like The Rabbit Cried, they're little children's books that explain loss to children, just like Mr. Rogers. But guess what? Explaining the loss to children can sometimes help the adults too. There's something called assumptive world. Remember, one of the issues that's related to grief is your perception about what's going to happen. This deals with expectations, beliefs. This is what shapes hopes, wishes, fantasies, dreams. It also shapes our fears. It's what Sheryl Sandberg wrote about in a book called Option B. She and her husband were going to a wedding at a fancy resort in Mexico. He died in the gymnasium early one morning by himself. Even though she's number 3 at Facebook, their perfect life with kids, and they loved each other, and it was a love story. They didn't get married till they were older. And she wrote a book with Adam Grant, Facing Adversity, Building Resilience, Finding Joy. How do you do that? Face the secondary stress, Identify, list out with your patients and all the multiplying factors of complicated grief. Did you have loss financially? Did you have loss relationally? Asking patients, what were you going through with your extended family, your aging family? Asking people about finances. Believe me, if you can talk about masturbation and sexual issues, you can talk about money issues. Sometimes clinicians and outpatients, they're afraid to talk about money. That's why they're always struggling financially. Talk openly about the losses. So what helps? We have to stabilize patients. How? Getting people fully present, facilitating thoughts and feelings, gathering facts. That's by listing things out. And finances during the Great Recession, just having people list out, how much do you owe on your student loans? Let's just sit down with a legal pad. Don't make it hard. Facing it is a big part. And then being able to give practical help and resources and tools. Now, I already have helped you to see you have to confront the reality of the loss and acknowledge the pain is real. We're going to normalize. Everybody's going through this. You didn't fail. I wrote an article for local media. You'll find it at the WFTV website. It's an open letter to furloughed Disney workers, the 110,000. And part of it was to give them hope. Walt Disney, until the last 10 years of his life, constantly had financial pressures and problems. In the crisis, he got more creative. You can too. And one of the things that I pointed out was, guess what? You didn't fail. A hospitality company, the best in the world, has no guests to be hospitable toward. That'll turn around. That'll change in a couple of months. We'll get through this. Letting people know it's okay to feel scared. Letting people talk. Story is healing. Story. Let me tell you a story. Because if I can get into the backstory, your backstory, and let the grief out, you know what happens? Complicated grief starts to dissipate. I want to give them tools and skills. That's what the 100 pages of tools that the website is about. But look at the bottom one. Refer as needed. If you're a clinician and you see this person has complicated grief, I don't think I'm skilled. And if you're not, it's okay. I teach a class at the foundation in Baltimore. This is days of skilled training to be able to spot, identify, and treat, and to know when to refer. Because in Orlando, people that didn't want to do crisis work after the Pulse massacre of a terrorist who not only attacked a nightclub, that was part of a multiplication weekend. Many of you probably worked and helped people. Pulse, the second highest number of bodies of people killed in the history of the United States. But the night before, Christina Grimmie, a finalist on NBC's The Voice, had been shot and killed at the Plaza Theater across from the Beefy King on Bumby in front of 200 grandmas and ma's and little kids. And then 2 days after Pulse, Lane was taken off of a beach at the Grand Floridian Resort Hotel at Walt Disney World and drowned in Bay Lake. Orlando had loss and crisis upon loss and crisis. And you know what we learned? We learned how to get through multiplication. See, the first wave is the disease spread. That's in March 2020. The second wave, that's March 11. People starting to hoard supplies. Third wave, lockdown, social isolation, depression. And that goes through part of March into early April. The fourth wave, financial recession, unemployment, stimulus checks. The debts are building. That's into early, mid-April 2020. The fifth wave, funerals, loss of normal traditions, no graduations. That's right now. The sixth wave, oh yeah, that's coming. PTSD, CPTSD, complicated grief, suicide, domestic violence, and more. And that's why we're giving you skills and tools. When a major catastrophe happens, like you see on the graphic, all you can feel is the pain. All you can feel is the loss. You can't see anything else. Life gets squeezed by the hardship and the pain and the hurt and the loss, and you just can't see anything to function. Think of an oyster. A little grain of sand comes into that shell, and the oyster, it hurts. It hurts a lot. And so what does the oyster do? Well, the oyster secretes a substance, and eventually that becomes a pearl. And when you think about that, the pearl is the only gemstone that comes out of pain. And maybe right now, you or somebody that you love, somebody you know, this is making sense to you, and you say, I think I have this. Okay, that's normal. It's not a sign of weak. It's a sign of human. I wish you were here in the study where I record videos and post on social media about here's how to cope, because I would say, let's make a customized plan to deal with your very normal pain in a very abnormal situation. Life gets squeezed by hardship and pain. And see, if I could learn your story, then sometimes I would say, oh, that's just like Ray Charles. See, many people go, oh, yeah, Ray Charles, hit the road, Jack. I remember Ray Charles. Yeah, but what you forget, Ray Charles lived in Orlando, Florida. Ray Charles, the blind entertainer who changed the world forever, as you see on the stamp commemorating his life. He was born in rural Florida. His parents sent him to the St. Augustine School for the blind and deaf. And when he was a teenager at that school, he had so much talent, they said, you should go to Orlando. And off of Church and Paramore, he lived for almost 2 years as an older teenager trying to find work. And there was not enough work for a jazz musician. So he went to Tampa, Florida, and was discovered. And they said, you should go to Chicago because that's where your style of jazzy blues and Ray Charles. You know what Ray Charles did? He followed a formula that I believe. Face it, feel it, grieve it, grow. Face it, feel it, grieve it, and grow. So what are we facing? The largest crisis in our lifetime. Our kids, we'll face other stuff if you have kids and grandkids, but we're facing the largest crisis. But guess what? We'll get through it. We'll survive this. And we'll survive it because we are stronger together. Just like Ray Charles. He kept reinventing. But you see, when he did his feel it and grieve it and grow, you know how he did it? Through music. I love to read, and I've read over 5,000 books, many of them biographies. James Taylor was in a treatment center for 10 months, a treatment center much like Central Florida Behavioral. He was there for 10 months as a teenager because of opioid addiction, and his parents put him there. And that's when James Taylor, the musician, learned to use music because a therapist said, maybe if you would take all of your hurt and your pain, and maybe if you would just set it to music. And he did. His dad said, you were not going back to Greenwich Village where you got hooked on this stuff. I'm sending you to London to live with family. And in London, through a coffee shop where he was playing music, a guy heard him and said, will you come and play that song for my boss? Something about the way she moves. And he said, yeah, sure. His boss, by the way, was George Harrison. James Taylor was signed to the Beatles when he was 19 years old. What did he do? He faced it, he felt it, and he grieved it through writing. He let the pain out. What happens? You grow. You grow. That's what happens. Somebody else who did that, Teddy Roosevelt, sickly child. His parents took him to doctor after doctor. Finally, when he was a teenager, they said, oh, if you do weight training, it's going to help you. And it did, changed his life, went to Harvard, met the love of his life, got married. And then his dad died 2 years after he and his wife, Alice, were married. And then the next year, his wife died 3 days after giving birth to their first baby girl. 4 hours later, his mom died. And Teddy Roosevelt said, my life is about pain. I can't function. But the weirdest thing happened, because you'll see in the graphic, if you keep living life, if you keep moving forward, if you choose to take one more breath, if you choose to go to therapy, read, study the lives of other people who became resilient, the pain gets covered over just like the pearl. And life goes on. The pain's still there, but it gets covered over. Oh, yeah. Teddy Roosevelt, he had what we would call a nervous breakdown after his wife and mom died on the same day, Valentine's Day, 1888. He said, the light has gone out of me. He spends 3 years in the Dakotas, and basically like a nervous breakdown, but he saw the healing power of nature. He came back after less than 3 years and said, I'm going to be a public servant. I may never marry again, but I'm going to help people see how to heal, and started something when he became president of the United States called the National Parks as a place for mental and spiritual rest and recovery. Out of nature, you can rebuild resilience. Why did I tell you that story? Well, TR's life went on, but I also want you to know, if you're grieving, I wish you could get outside to a national park. I wish you could get out to a state park. They're going to open on Monday because our family are members of the state park system, and you pay an annual fee and you can park for free. Most of them, it's only $4 or $5 to park. And sometimes just to be in the beauty of nature, you will heal. That's why you'll see treatment centers frequently will be in the mountains. They'll be on a beach. They'll be out in the forest. Why? People heal better out in nature. They can find spiritual rest. You can too. So what are some of the tools to cope with complicated grief? This is research from the University of Pennsylvania. They call it self-compassion. Now, I hope you have people in your life, people that you can say, hey, you know what? I'm having a pretty rough day here. I need somebody to talk me off the ledge. If you don't have those people, I hope you get some. I hope you do. I have people like that in my life. We talk not every day through this, but at least every couple of days. Because I have several of them, it's almost every day I'm talking to somebody, and I'm helping them with the tough times, or they're helping me. Because you don't get through this by yourself. It's too big. The waves are too big. You and I need other people. That's why to be able to have supports, to be able to have groups, to be able to have online groups, those are available now. You're not in this alone. But you do have to feel the grief. You have to let yourself feel. You can't stay the strong one forever. You can't be the one, I just suck it up and I hold it together for my family. It's too big. The waves are too big. These are 100-foot waves. But you see, when you start to feel the emotion, now you can help other people to be able to deal with their emotion. That's not weakness. It's human. Humans do better. When it hurts, we cry. When I was working on the pile one night in New York City after the terrorist attacks and the towers had fallen down, you met people from everywhere. And there was a young man, and he just looked off to me a little bit. And I walked up, introduced myself. I had on identification from Orange County, Florida. And I said, what's your name? He said, it's Matt. I'll never forget. He was from Oklahoma. He was a firefighter. He wasn't even 20 years old. He said, I've never seen anything like this. And I said, me neither, Matt. And one of my favorite things to do as a clinician dealing with hurt and grief and pain and loss, I just simply like to say, tell me your story. Tell me what happened. We heal in story. We heal in small groups of community. Tell me your story. And so he told me how from Oklahoma, they had people that were volunteering to come and help for a few weeks at Ground Zero. And people came from all over the country, and it was wonderful. But as he told me that, he started to cry. Now, this is a young man with big muscles, and we had on our emergency gear, hard hats and such, steel-toed boots, and he started weeping. And I hugged him, and I said, let it out, man. Just cry it out. It's okay. It's okay to cry. Because when I'm able to make it okay to be human, this will be the biggest crisis event of our life, and we will survive it better together. And using tools of self-compassion that have been tested in the clinical research, but more importantly, tested by hundreds of people that I've watched through the years get through it. You have to stay in the present, not live in the fear of the future. Remember the positive moments if you've lost a loved one. I like that little thing on Facebook or Instagram, and it'll say, here's what you were doing on Apple Pictures a year ago or 10 years ago. I love those because positive memories are very healing. When I look at it, meaning, I'll tell you a story about that in a minute, but what is your meaning through COVID-19? What are you going to take away from the pandemic? Remember, life causes things to change. Change is painful. It causes feelings of loss and grief and hurt. But if you stay with it, just like the pearl. If you stay with it, you will grow. One of the firefighters I talked to who had lost one of his staff a few weeks ago, he said, Dwight, do you know the story of the lobster? I went, no, I don't think so. He said, my rabbi taught it to me. It's really cool. He said, can I teach it to you? I said, yeah, absolutely. You bet. I love story. He said, a lobster does not get big. And of course, he has that shell, that outer shell. He said, the lobster doesn't get big without pain. I said, how? He said, the lobster, the inside of the shell is just kind of gooey stuff, very soft. His enemies could take him down. And his shell doesn't grow. He grows into the shell, and then there's pain and pressure. And he has to go find a rock. He has to find a cave and somehow go into the deepest, darkest part of the cave and shed that shell. And in a couple of days, he'll grow a new one. I said, wow. He said, my rabbi taught that once you can shed your shell, it's painful. But then you grow a new one. Yeah, that's finding meaning. That's what we're looking for. Being able to connect and contribute to other people. And this is going to be big because when we get 7 weeks from now and our community starts to fully reopen and the schools reopen several months from now, we're going to have a chance to be #Orlando United. I believe that our community can lead the country. People will watch Orlando. If Walt Disney World, Universal Studios, SeaWorld, Legoland, Gatorland, and Fun Spot, if Central Florida can heal and restore well, safely, the rest of the country will say if the happiest place on earth can do it, we can do it too. People will come together in community, practicing kindness. You've heard of random acts of kindness. You know, you get up to the drive-through window at Starbucks and you pay for the people behind you. When Starbucks in Connecticut had over 100 people do that before somebody broke the streak. I hope they didn't tell him, you just messed it up for everybody, buddy. Because practicing random acts of kindness will heal things in you. We already talked about connecting in nature, so healing. And of course, the vitamin D level. And during times of extreme stress and trauma and protracted grief, your vitamin D levels can get depleted. So you can take supplements, but I wish sometimes you just get outside and live simple. People have figured out, before I went and did a lot of things, went to a lot of movies and went out to eat a lot. And I figured out I can save a lot of money if I stay home and watch movies on Disney Plus or Hulu. If I just stay at home and watch Amazon Prime, I'm just as happy and won't make homemade pizza. Simple. That's how you deal with protracted grief and loss and identify what you can control. Now, I want you to understand, I'm dealing with the mental health, the psychological issues of the pandemic. There are medical and physical. Yes, practice physical distancing. You'll be doing that for a year and a half. Wash your hands. The Center for Disease Control and the physicians there, the ER docs I know, 20 times a day, roughly 2 times every hour. You're washing your hands. Why? Because one tiny speck of a virus can kill you, and it can live on a flat surface, some flat surfaces up to 9 days. Call your friends, especially the ones you haven't heard from. Check in on people. Play games. I talked to one dad. He said, before coronavirus, my teenage daughters lived on their phones. And he said, now they beg me to play Uno. And he started to cry. He said, my teenage daughters want to be with their daddy. They want to play Uno because now we feel more like a family than ever. He said, who do I thank that I got my girls back? They're not lost on Pinterest or doing some Snapchat. They're spending time with my wife and I. If you work from home, people tend to work more if they work from home. So please set limits and boundaries and remember to wear pants if you're on a Zoom. But helping other people helps us, but do not go down the rabbit hole of worst case scenario. OMG, we're all going to die. We're not going to make it is a lie. Listen, I've watched people deal with crisis for over 30 years since the terrorist attacks in Oklahoma City. I've worked in this industry, the Palm Bay shooter. I didn't want to work in this industry, but there just weren't enough trained people. And so I kept taking training and I said, I'll go help. And that's what I'm about. That's why on social media, blogs, websites, radio stations around the country, here on Z88.3, WDBO, WFTV, Channel 9. I'm really big on Let me give you tools to help. Why? I'll tell you in a minute. Because once you acknowledge the loss, you can move forward. There's some tremendous resources. This is from Columbia University. The web link is up there, https://complicatedgrief.columbia.edu/professional/manual-tools/. These are comprehensive guides. I found every major university in the country. Some of the research I was doing, because when Vicki and Gavin and I sat down and talked about this 6 weeks ago, I started doing the research. I've been working for weeks to give you tools, resources, upload things to the website to give you the best that I could find, because you're going to help people I'll never meet. And I hope that you'll access those tools and give them to other people, because you don't get through crisis by yourself. Think about it. Barcelona, 1992. That's Derek Redmond, favored to win the 400 sprint, a British runner, fastest man in the world, on the heat before the final at the Olympics. He tore a hamstring and was trying to finish and limping. And the man next to him with the ball cap is his daddy. His dad burst past security from the stands and ran down on the field. It's the most watched moment in the history of the Olympics. When you go to Olympics.com, a dad went down on the field and said, "You're limping, you're hurting, you're broken, but you're not alone. You're not alone." I would say that to you right now. You're not alone. Complicated grief is hurting everybody, but you're not in this alone. We're stronger together. One of us is not as strong as all of us. If you can't tell, I'm passionate about making Central Florida a better place. There's an old saying, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood and don't assign them tasks and work. No. Teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. It touches my heart right now. And I'll tell you why. I watched Orlando before Disney. I watched our city become the most visited, one of the most visited in the world, the most visited in North America. I love our community. How do you rebuild community? Rebuild the people. Rebuild the people. That's how. When you rebuild people, when you're able to rebuild one heart at a time, you rebuild community. When you rebuild community, you know what happens? We heal. And we heal better together. We're stronger together. John Gordon is a sports psychologist in Jacksonville, Florida. He's a sports psychologist for the award-winning Clemson Tigers. If you say, oh, yeah, what is that? Well, that's college football. It will be back. I'm not sure how many fans they'll let in, but there will be college football. That you can be sure. There will be baseball. I'm already hearing from people who are professionals in those industries. NASCAR will be back, PGA. John's a sports psychologist, really cool guy. He wrote a book called The Energy Bus. It'll change your workplace. It's a little parable story, about 80 pages. And John's just a really good thinker. He said, what could I do to get through COVID-19? Because if you stay in the fear zone, you hoard food and toilet paper, and you make everybody around you scared. But look at what happens when you go to the learning zone. When you say, Central Florida Behavioral Hospital, yes, I'm going to sign up for a webinar. I want to be part of gaining skills and tools and resources so I'm not carrying complicated grief into my workplace, my family. I want to carry resilience and strength. Well, you see, when you get out of the fear zone into the learning zone, you go into the growth zone. The growth zone is full of gratitude. You can change your mood, and it's one of the exercises we have people do with complicated grief. We have them focus on 3 things a day you're grateful for. You say, well, I've heard of that. Yeah, do it. Instead of continually living in the fear, the doubt, just write down 3 things you're grateful for. It's part of self-care. Be aware of your own needs. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Isn't that what Mr. Rogers said? We should always listen to Mr. Rogers. He's a pretty smart guy. Here's what I learned. Self-care first. You. Put the oxygen mask on you. And then family care, and then friend care, and then coworker care, and then neighbor care. And then you can take care of the rest of the world. I'm big on community. Rebuild the people, you rebuild community, but rebuild you first. How? Practice mental wellness. Notice if you take and change one letter, mental illness becomes mental wellness. Mental illness becomes mental wellness. How do you do that? One letter. You get rid of the I, mental illness. That's what behavioral treatment centers do. We help people move from the W, or from the I to the W, from illness to wellness. All you have to do is change one letter. Illness, wellness. When I move from I to we, we're stronger together. And we're stronger together when we're able to deal with stress and learn from each other, practice coping skills, and make it a big deal. The next 18 months on the timeline, you're going to be talking to your friends, family. How you doing? How you holding up? What are you doing? Connect to community organizational resources, and everybody's coming up with creative ideas. I love it. Practice emotional health, and remember, if you talk through it, you get through it. Reconnect to social groups because we heal in small group. We build immunity. But look at this, halfway down the page. Talk about life outside COVID loss. Look at the very bottom. Model courage. We survive better together. One of the people that helped me do that was a man named George Yance. If you've ever heard on the cable TV something called the Gaither Homecoming videos, you've probably seen him at Cracker Barrel. George Yance was the deep bass voice, and he was a friend of my wife and I. Before George died, because I was concerned, I'm going to miss you so much. He had cancer, and he'd survived heart attack and a lot of other things. He shared this with me, and from my friend George, I want to share it with you. Because if you're dealing with complicated grief, maybe these words will heal. Should you go first, and I remain to walk the road alone, I'll live in memory's garden, dear, with happy days we've known. In spring, I'll wait for roses red, when fades the lilac blue. In early fall, when brown leaves call, I'll catch a glimpse of you. Should you go first, and I remain, for battles to be fought, each thing you've touched along the way will be a hallowed spot. Oh, I'll hear your voice. I'll see your smile, though blindly I may grope. The memory of your helping hand will buoy me on with hope. And should you go first and I remain, to finish with the scroll, no lengthening shadow shall creep in to make this life seem droll. We've known so much of happiness. We've had our cup of joy. And memory is one gift of God that death cannot destroy. Should you go first and I remain, one thing I'd have you do. Walk slowly down that long, long path, for soon I'll follow you, and I'll want to know each step you take, that I may walk the same. For someday, down that long, long road, you'll hear me call your name. And every time I read that, I think of my friend. You see him on the screen. And he was so kind to my wife and I when we were a young couple. Created so many opportunities, kind of like a mentor, but he reminded me, memory is a gift death cannot destroy. So what do we do to get through complicated grief as we turn the corner to wrap things up? Connect to your core beliefs, values. Ignore negative news. I want you to focus on positive news, like the ABC television special about parents of special needs kids and how they're getting through it. Or Nathaniel's Hope, one of my favorite local charities. They make special need kids, VIP kids, to give moms and dads a break. NathanielsHope.com. I hope you'll check it out because they do such good work with those VIP kids. Look for stories like how McDonald's gives meals, free meals, to first responders every single day, or how a New York investment guy looked at the tents in Central Park and said, who are these people from Samaritan's Purse doing army hospitals in my park? And he went down to find out and became a volunteer. And he said, they're helping people. Look for good news stories like Ben Platt and the cast of Dear Evan Hansen. You can look it up on YouTube. You will be found singing from their homes. It'll make you cry. Look for positive news stories, because if you find a way to cry out and to release the grief and the hurt and the loss, you won't act out. With drugs, alcohol, food, nope. If you cry out, you won't act out. This is a picture on the Blue Ridge Parkway of a place called Rattlesnake Mountain Tunnel. As you can tell, complicated grief is either a cave or a tunnel. If it's a cave, you're going to want to give up. But if it's a tunnel, there's a light on the other side. Nelson Mandela saw that in a prison, 27 years and imprisoned. And when he left, Did he hold on to all the hurt and pain, loss? No, look at what he said. As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison. There's some things we'll let go of. Mother Teresa said, here's the paradox. If you love until it hurt, there's no more hurt, just more love. Giving, sharing, helping, feeding, getting involved in community. You say, well, I can't touch people. I want you to know you need community. The physical distancing rules from the CDC, we will all follow responsibly because that's what responsible people do. We need community. We need community events. You see, a year ago, I got to dance with my daughter, and I missed the anniversary of that dance. It was epic. We did it as a surprise. And I sent her this picture because we did one of those surprise dance things, and a friend of mine snapped this jumping. And I said, I tell you why I get so choked up, because I had a heart attack years ago, and I got a second chance, and most middle-aged guys don't. I got to dance with my daughter at my wedding, and community will heal, and people will heal, and complicated grief, if you press on through it, you'll dance again. It's what Viktor Frankl taught in a little book he wrote after World War II called Man's Search for Meaning. He was in a Nazi death camp where almost everybody died. His mom, his dad, his wife, his brother, his relatives died, his friends. But this psychiatrist didn't die because he said, and I put it on the screen, everything can be taken from a man but one thing. The last of the human freedoms is to choose your attitude in any given set of circumstances. You can choose your own way. Dr. Frankl won the Nobel Prize for those words. Oh, yeah, that bridge? Because I said you never see the fall, just the crash. You never see the fall of COVID. You see the crash. You never see the fall from the erosion that builds up with complicated grief. You see the crash, but that's the Sunshine Skyway. I took this picture on an ice cream adventure with my dad about 6 months ago. Bridges can be rebuilt and people can grow through grief because people can heal and people can change and complicated grief can be restored. Take these principles, go to the website, share them, download them, spread the word. We can rebuild and heal. We don't have to stay stuck. We can move forward. And maybe I can help you do that. I post every day. This is from a webinar, or actually it was a podcast that we did on LinkedIn, where one day a week, I'm a coach for people changing their careers. And if you don't know about LinkedIn, it's owned by Microsoft, and it's like Facebook for people that want better jobs. LinkedIn says I have one of the top 1% of profiles in behavioral health globally. And I love helping people find their way. So maybe we'll stay connected on LinkedIn or on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. Maybe you and I will cross somewhere on a timeline, and I'll be a resource to help you, because I want you to know complicated grief is solved by living. It's solved by living. And that's what we are all going to continue to do. So this time, I'm going to say thank you for spending time. I hope we can stay connected on LinkedIn or other places. I hope the resources and tools from Central Florida Behavioral Hospital, they're a pioneer in rebuilding and connecting community. And I hope that we meet again in making Central Florida, my hometown, a better place, because we will survive this better together. And now I'll give control of the meeting back to you, Gabby.
Thank you, Dwight, and thank you for being such a resource to us here at Central Florida Behavioral Hospital. You know, you talked about social media, your LinkedIn and Facebook, and how important it is to be connected. So I'd like to ask everybody on this call to please go to our Facebook page and follow and like, as well as our LinkedIn page, so that you can become aware of any trainings like this and bring these trainings out to your community and to your folks that you can help personally. With that, we're going to open it up for a couple of questions here, Dwight. One here that comes from Jamie Donnelly. I think it's maybe a little bit of a complicated question, maybe even a little bit of an opinionated question, but I think it's an important question. So the question is, we have to open up. The question is, what do you say to people who say we have to open up and it's not safe medically? It becomes a daily debate that you can rebuild your business, but you can't change death. So where do we find that line?
Well, it's a great question, and it's certainly an important one. Here's where I find the line, cdc.gov. The Centers for Disease Control, I think they had it to post, and then they pulled it down because of some political squabble. But, Jamie, I have it. If you go to my LinkedIn and send me a message. I'll send you the CDC guidelines. It covers every major industry on here's the safe way to open up in June. These are the guidelines and protocols. However, it's a risk versus responsibility issue. You measure risk versus responsibility. I look at my responsibility as a worker and I look at my risk. And if my employer, I believe, is being irresponsible, CDC.gov, I'm going to say, boss, why would you argue with the best doctors in the country? Johns Hopkins University, johnhopkins.edu is another. These are trusted sources. And so if I have people that are pressuring me to go into situations I feel unsafe or irresponsible, I'm going to measure the risk and I'm going to talk about it openly. I'm going to point toward the experts and maybe I'm going to walk away, but I'm going to do it with courage.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that question, Jamie. We have another question here from an anonymous person. The question is, why are women at a higher risk for complicated grief than men?
It makes me laugh because women feel. Now, I'm not saying that men are hard-hearted, hard-hearted Hannah from Savannah, but women tend to feel. And many times the reason women are more at risk for complicated grief is because they're in the more the caregiver role traditionally. I believe that women hold more on their shoulders. That's why this weekend, if you're a mom, I hope people shower you with blessings, but I wish they'd do it, not just, cook you a meal and do the dishes on Monday. I wish they'd do it every day. And being able to move forward is because women have so much on their plates. But the good news, it doesn't have to stay there. The giving tree is banned in public schools and in public libraries because some people said this teaches children to feel entitled with their mothers. Now, I don't see that. I think Shel Silverstein, because of a high ACEs score, wrote it because he looked at life a certain way. But I want you to know, open up conversations. If we talk through it, we get through it. And sometimes complex situations like this expose what was already there. And maybe mom has too much on her plate or single mom has too much on her plate. It's okay to say, I can't handle this. Let's talk about how we can redistribute the load. I think that's how we can keep moms from being exhausted, depleted, and empty.
Thank you for that answer. And one other question here. That question is, what are some things you can tell yourself or somebody you may be coaching or working with if you feel that you just can't take it anymore?
Well, the thing I'm going to do when I hit overload, I've been there many times. Remember, had a heart attack. I reach out. I check my own temperature every day. I practice self-care every day. Since COVID started over 6 weeks ago, today is week 7, the beginning of week 7 of the 14-week timeline that we're going through here in Central Florida. And self-care before was about 20 to 30 minutes a day. Now it's 90. Because, Gabby, I knew that there were going to be hundreds of people that I needed to give tools and resources and ideas to. So when I know there's more of a demand, I ramp up the self-care and I reach out to, I talked to my counselor last night. And how do we do it? Self-care and then family care. And then you reach out to your friends, your coworkers, then you reach out to community. But it flows out of when you feel like you're hitting overload, you're already there. You're either living on reserve, like a reserve tank, or you're burning reserve. If you're building reserve, that's what I'm talking about. That's what this daily self-care process is about. And maybe we'll do a webinar in the future on that topic. But if you're building it, you don't burn out. This is going to be an 18-month hike. It's challenging. We do better together. Do not go through this alone. Maybe get connected to me on LinkedIn. Send me a private message if you're stuck, and I'll say these are some things that help me because you're not in this alone.
The message is do not isolate. Reach out to your fellow person. You are not in this alone, and neither are we. Dwight, thank you so much. I'm going to give it over to Vicki Lewis to close this out.
Thank you, Dwight, and thank you, everyone, for participating and attending. We just believe it's our responsibility to provide training, top-notch training that will educate everyone on how to rebuild and take care of themselves. And Dwight, I know of no one any better to do that than you. You've done a tremendous amount of research, and you've given tools that would just be so hard to do unless you're qualified as you are. And it's a heartfelt thank you. We are likewise, Dwight and those of us at Central Florida Behavioral have decided that it's important to reach out to our clergy and the community and give them also some of this education and the information to help them and as you said, the 18 months ahead. That will be so important for them to be able to be a resource in the community. So we're doing that, I believe, on May 29th at 9 o'clock in the morning. Invitations will be going out to the individuals within the community, but you can also help pass that along. Dwight, thank you very, very much. And mothers and women, we say Happy Mother's Day. We trust that you have a safe and enjoyable day. Thanks, everyone.